The galaxy had been mapped for centuries. Countless species, countless worlds, each with their place among the stars. Alien civilizations, thriving and advanced, sprawled across a vast network that stretched from one end of the galaxy to the other. But there was one thing that all the maps had in common. Every single one of them stopped at the edge of human space. It wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. The very borders of human territory, marked with a bold, unbroken line, were where the map would cease to exist. And no one dared to ask why. The galactic powers had many theories, but none of them could explain why humanity was left to occupy this one small corner of the galaxy. The Orvani, the most powerful of the galactic rulers, were quiet about it. The Viral, a race of hyper-intelligent beings, had their own explanations, though they were hardly ever shared. And the Exilo, the fearsome warriors from the distant reaches of the galaxy, simply avoided any mention of Earth and its surrounding space. Yet, all agreed something about that edge, that invisible barrier, felt wrong. Humanity had been content, at least for a time, to live within its borders, unaware of the significance of this silent isolation. But things were beginning to change. Rumors spread. Whispers of an ancient civilization that once thrived beyond the galactic edge, a civilization that had left behind powerful secrets. And most terrifying of all, there were claims that this once great empire was not dead, not gone, but waiting. Waiting for the moment when the map's boundary would be breached. The first to question it were the explorers. They had always been the curious ones, the ones who dared to push the limits. A group of human scientists, led by a brilliant but cautious commander, set out to uncover the truth. The mission was simple: cross the boundary, map the unknown, and answer the most persistent question of all: why had the galaxy refused to go beyond human space? What had the others found, or feared, that kept them at bay? But as they ventured deeper into the void, something felt off. It wasn't just the cold silence of uncharted space, it was something more. A presence, ancient and immense, seemed to watch them. The closer they got, the more unsettling the feeling became. Technology that had once worked perfectly began to malfunction. Communications with the fleet grew distant, fragmented. And then, they found it. A structure buried deep within a forgotten star system. It was massive, far too massive to be of human origin. And as the crew approached, a chill ran through them. It was not just a relic of the past. It was alive. They had stumbled upon something older than any civilization in the galaxy, and it had been waiting for them. The question was no longer just about the map. It was about what humanity had unknowingly stepped into. Something dangerous. Something that could unravel the very fabric of their existence. The crew could feel it closing in. The weight of 1,000 years of secrets pressing down on them. But it was too late to turn back. The discovery had been made. The mystery had begun. And somewhere, beyond the stars, someone or something was watching. What would humanity do now? Would they embrace the unknown or be consumed by it? The answers lay ahead, hidden in the darkness. The crew of the Odyssey was composed of some of the brightest minds humanity had to offer. Commander Aria Holt, a seasoned veteran of deep space exploration, had led countless missions. But nothing had prepared her for this. Not the strange sensation that tingled down her spine every time they approached the ancient structure, nor the eerie silence that surrounded them like a suffocating fog. She knew, deep down, that this wasn't just another discovery. This was something far more profound. Aria stood before the communications console, staring at the screen as the feed from Earth grew more fragmented. It was becoming harder to get through to command. The distance, they'd said. The technology just couldn't keep up. But she wasn't buying it. The ship's systems were all operating at full capacity. No, something was interfering with their communications. Something powerful. Anything new from the system? Aria asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. Lieutenant Keller, a young but sharp-minded officer, looked up from his terminal. Nothing. Just static. It's like the whole area is alive. Everything we scan, every probe we send out, it vanishes before we can get a solid read. Aria clenched her fist, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. This isn't just a problem with our tech. There's something here, something keeping us from knowing the truth. Her thoughts drifted back to the first signs that something was wrong. The structure, buried beneath a dying star's shattered remains, had been an enigma from the start. It wasn't a ship, nor a station. Its architecture was unlike anything Arya had ever seen. Impossible angles, surfaces that seemed to shift in the light. It felt ancient, like a tomb. But it wasn't dead. No. It was watching them. Every scan they took, every probe they launched, seemed to trigger something inside the structure. At first, it was small things, a strange flicker in their sensor data. But as they drew closer, it escalated. The structure began to pulse with an unnatural energy, a hum that reverberated through the ship. The crew couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive, its own heartbeat, just waiting for the right moment. "The ship's readings are getting more erratic," said Dr. Lars Kincaid, the mission's lead scientist. His voice held a note of concern that Arya hadn't heard before. "It's almost as if it's interacting with us, like it knows we're here." "We're not here for a light show, Lars," Arya said, her tone sharp. "We're here to figure out why this place is abandoned. And we're going to do it without waking up whatever it is inside." Kincaid shifted uneasily. "Commander, I don't think we're alone. The readings, they've changed. This isn't just an ancient relic. This is something far older. And something far more dangerous." Arya turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you trying to tell me?" "We've made a discovery," Kincaid said quietly, glancing nervously at his team. "It's a language. Or a code. One we've never seen before. But it's here, etched into the very structure." Arya felt a chill settle over her. The implications were staggering. They had discovered alien languages, ancient writings on distant worlds, but nothing like this. And Kincaid hesitated. "It's not just a message. It's a warning." The words hit Arya like a punch to the gut. A warning? From whom? From what? She had always known the risks of deep space exploration. But nothing in her training, nothing in her years of experience, had prepared her for the reality of what they had stumbled upon. The hum from the structure grew louder, vibrating through the ship's hull. The lights flickered as if in response. Something was waking up. Something ancient. "Commander," Keller's voice was tight with urgency. "You need to see this." Arya rushed to the observation deck, her heart racing. The structure was no longer still. It was shifting, its enormous form pulsing with energy, as though it were coming alive. And then, in the blackness of space, a single bright light flared from the heart of the structure, piercing through the void. It was a signal. The silence in the room was deafening. The crew was frozen, staring at the light. No one dared to speak. The light grew brighter, then dimmed. A shadow moved inside the structure. Something was coming. But what? The light from the structure was unlike anything they had seen before. It flickered in irregular pulses, almost like it was trying to communicate, but with no clear pattern. Arya stood at the observation deck, her breath shallow, watching as the crew scrambled to analyze the anomaly. Every instinct told her to pull back, to retreat before they triggered something they couldn't control. But curiosity was a dangerous thing, and this was more than just a discovery, it was a challenge. A message. And she knew, deep down, that humanity could not afford to ignore it. "We need to get closer," Kincaid's voice cut through her thoughts, his tone both excited and fearful. "This could be the key to everything. We've been studying ancient alien texts for years, but this could change everything." Arya turned slowly to face him. She understood his fascination, his need to unlock the mysteries of the galaxy, but there was a fine line between discovery and destruction. "Lars, this is not just another alien artifact. Something is wrong here. We don't know what this is, or who or what is behind it." Kincaid's eyes darkened, his hands twitching with barely contained energy. "That's exactly why we have to keep going. We've come this far. We can't stop now." She glanced at the rest of the crew. Keller, who was monitoring the ship's systems, looked just as uneasy. His eyes flicked between the ship's readings and the growing glow of the structure outside. "Commander," Keller said, his voice strained, "it's getting worse. Whatever's happening is interfering with our systems. Communications are becoming more erratic. We've lost contact with Earth completely." Arya's heart skipped. The gravity of the situation was starting to sink in. The deeper they pushed, the further they ventured into this unknown, the more they were isolating themselves from the rest of humanity. "Do you think that light is causing it?" Keller nodded grimly. "I can't be certain, but I've never seen anything like this. It's not just electromagnetic interference. It's like the very fabric of space is warping around us." The air in the observation room grew heavier, and Arya felt the weight of their situation pressing down on her. Every second they stayed here, the more dangerous things became. And yet, the pull of the unknown was undeniable. Could they really turn back now? What if this was their only chance to uncover the truth? "We need to make a decision," she said, her voice steady, but the uncertainty lurking beneath it was clear. "If we stay here, we risk getting trapped. If we move forward, we have no idea what we're walking into." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Even the usually calm Lieutenant Keller was on edge, and Kincaid, ever the dreamer, had no intention of turning back. But it was more than that. Something about the structure, something in the way it seemed to react to their presence, was compelling them forward. It was as though it knew they were there, as though it wanted them to come closer. "Commander, I think we need to get closer," Kincaid repeated, his voice softer now, almost a plea. "I've been running simulations, and I think we can access the core if we go in at the right angle." Arya's eyes narrowed. She could see the desperation in his face. "What exactly are you hoping to find, Lars?" Kincaid hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I believe it's an archive, a place where an ancient civilization stored its knowledge. And I think it's still intact. Maybe even functional." Arya didn't respond immediately. Her mind was racing. This was more than a simple expedition. If Kincaid's theory was right, this could be the breakthrough of the century, the kind of discovery that would elevate humanity to the level of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. But at what cost? "Do it," she finally said, her voice steady. "But I want full control of the operation." We moved cautiously. No risks. As the crew made preparations, the ship's systems continued to flicker, struggling to maintain stability. The hum from the structure outside grew louder, more insistent. It was like a heartbeat, pulsing in time with their own. They made their approach, slowly at first, as if afraid to disturb the fragile balance between them and the ancient entity that lay beyond. The ship crept closer, inch by inch, until it hovered just outside the structure's reach. The pulsating light now filled the viewports, bathing the crew in an eerie glow. Then, as if in response to their presence, the structure reacted. A deep, resonant sound echoed through the ship, vibrating the hull like the ringing of an ancient bell. The air grew thick with static, and for a brief moment, the lights on the ship flickered and died. Everything went dark. The crew held their breath. And then, the ship's comm system crackled to life. A voice, faint but clear, whispered across the airwaves. The voice wasn't human. "Welcome, travelers," it said, and the ship shuddered violently. The voice was not what they had expected. It wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. The crew's faces paled, and Arya's heart sank. Who are you?" she whispered. But before anyone could respond, the ship lurched, sending them all sprawling. The lights flickered again, and the hum outside grew louder, more insistent. They had crossed a threshold, and whatever lay ahead was no longer just an exploration. It was a test they may not survive. The ship's sudden lurch threw everyone off balance, and the lights flickered again, casting the crew in a strobe-like pattern of shadow and light. Arya gripped the edge of the console, steadying herself, her heart pounding in her chest. What was happening? The voice, the alien voice, had been nothing like they expected. It wasn't the typical welcoming tone of an artifact they'd uncovered. It wasn't an ancient intelligence reaching out to make contact. It was a warning. A threat. Report. Arya's command was sharp, cutting through the chaos that had descended on the bridge. Keller was already working frantically at his console, his hands flying over the buttons in a desperate attempt to stabilize the ship's systems. "We're being pulled in," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. "The gravitational field around the structure. It's messing with our trajectory. We're stuck in its orbit, and I can't break free." The hum outside was deafening now, reverberating through the ship's hull with a deep, oppressive force. It was as if the very core of the structure was alive, responding to their intrusion. Arya could feel it in the pit of her stomach, the weight of something ancient and powerful, something that wasn't meant to be disturbed. The crew scrambled to regain control, but the ship was no longer responding as it should. The artificial gravity fluctuated, throwing everyone off their feet. A low, bone-rattling groan filled the air as the ship shuddered violently once more. The lights died, plunging them into darkness, and for a few terrifying moments, nothing but the relentless hum outside filled the void. And then the voice returned. Clearer this time. Stronger. More demanding. "Foolish creatures," it hissed, its tone icy and unyielding. "You have no place here." The words sent a chill through Arya's body. She wasn't sure whether it was the force of the voice or the crushing weight of what it implied, but the air in the room grew thick. It felt like something was closing in, something older than time itself, something that was not just watching them, but judging them. "Commander!" Kincaid's voice cracked through the tension. He had managed to stabilize his terminal long enough to make a discovery that left him pale and shaken. "I've found something. In the structure's data, it's a blueprint, a map. But it's not just a star map. It's a map of destruction. This structure, this place, it's not a library or archive. It's a weapon." Arya's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of weapon?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know. But it's massive. We're inside something far beyond anything we've ever encountered. And I think it's awakening." The hum outside grew louder, a steady thrum vibrating through the ship. Then, as if on cue, the ship lurched once more, pulling them even closer to the structure. A sharp, blinding flash of light enveloped the entire ship, followed by a shockwave that sent the crew sprawling. The comm system crackled back to life, and the voice spoke once more, but this time it was not a warning. It was a promise. "Your species will be the last to trespass here." Suddenly, everything went silent. The tension was suffocating. Arya's mind raced. They had crossed a line they could never uncross. Whatever this thing was, it was not just a remnant of an ancient civilization. It was a force of nature, and it was waking up. And worse, it had singled them out. Humanity was no longer just explorers. They were intruders, and this was the price they would pay. The bridge was chaos, the crew scrambling to make sense of the system failures, the alarms blaring in their ears. But amidst the panic, one thing stood out. The structure outside was moving. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed. It was shifting, expanding, as though it were reaching out, drawing them in. "Get us out of here!" Arya shouted, but Keller's frantic attempts to override the controls were useless. The gravitational pull was overwhelming now. The ship groaned again, its engines screaming against the force. The hull was beginning to creak under the pressure, and Arya could feel the structure's power closing in on them, wrapping them in a vise. Whatever was happening, it was far beyond their understanding. They had pushed too far, and now they were trapped in its grasp. Then, in the midst of the chaos, something strange happened. The ship's sensors flickered to life, displaying a strange pattern of data. Arya barely had time to process it before the ship's main screen burst to life with a terrifying image, a vast, spiraling black void opening in front of them. It wasn't just space, it was a rift, a tear in the very fabric of reality. And it was expanding. The crew stared in horror, unable to move, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The rift was not just some space anomaly, it was pulling them toward it. But just as Arya opened her mouth to issue a command, a new sound deeper, darker than the hum of the structure filled the room. a sound that vibrated in their bones, a growl so ancient, so primal, that it made the air around them seem to freeze. And then it spoke again. "You are too late." The deep rumbling growl that reverberated through the ship seemed to freeze time. The rift, vast and growing, stretched out before them, pulling at the fabric of space itself. Aria's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the twisting darkness, feeling the pull of something far beyond human comprehension. The voice, deep and cold, echoed through the ship again, its words filling the room with an oppressive weight. "You are too late." The crew stood frozen, paralyzed by the enormity of what was unfolding. The ship was no longer just caught in the gravitational pull of the structure, it was being drawn into the rift, into the very heart of the anomaly. Aria's mind raced, her thoughts a blur as she scrambled to make sense of everything. Suddenly, Kincaid stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "We need to stop it. We need to fight back somehow." He was gripping a data tablet, eyes scanning the information frantically. "There has to be something we can use. If this structure is a weapon, maybe we can turn it off." Aria's instincts told her to pull back, to get out of there before it was too late. But she couldn't bring herself to abandon the crew. They had all come too far. And besides, the voice had made it clear this wasn't just about them anymore. This was bigger. Humanity's fate was tied to this very moment. "Do it," Aria ordered, her voice sharp. "Find a way to stop it." Kincaid rushed to the control panel, frantically entering commands. The ship lurched again, the rift expanding faster now, its edges glowing with an unnatural energy. It was as if the rift itself were alive, feeding off their fear, growing stronger with every passing second. "We're running out of time," Keller shouted from his station. "I can't hold it off much longer." Aria's heart pounded in her chest as she looked around at her crew. They were all trying, doing everything they could to fight the overwhelming force pulling them in. But the rift was closing in on them, a ravenous maw in the fabric of the universe. And then, something strange happened. The rift's pull suddenly stopped. The ship hung in the stillness, the force no longer dragging them forward. For a moment, everything was eerily calm. Kincaid's hands shook as he stared at the console. I've done it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I've activated a failsafe in the structure. The weapon it's deactivating." The rift, which had seemed to have a life of its own, began to contract, its edges pulling inward slowly. The darkness started to recede, replaced by the familiar starry expanse of space. The ship was no longer caught in the rift's grasp. They were free. But the silence that followed was deafening. Aria took a deep breath, her body still tense from the adrenaline of the past few moments. They had survived. But at what cost? "We're not out of the woods yet," Keller said, his voice low. "The structure's still active. We've only delayed it." Aria nodded, her mind already turning over the next steps. They had stopped the immediate threat, but the mystery of the structure and the alien voice was far from over. What had they uncovered? Who had built this place, and why? Was humanity truly the last to reach it, or had the rift been waiting for them all along? As the crew worked to stabilize the ship and regain full control, Aria glanced out at the structure once more. The glowing pulse had dimmed, but she knew it wasn't gone. The structure was still there, still watching, and it wouldn't be long before they would have to face it again. But for now, they had survived, and that was something no one could take away from them. Humanity had crossed a line that day, one that no species in the galaxy had ever dared to cross. The rift had opened, but they had closed it. The power of the unknown was immense, but so was the strength of humanity's will to survive. The mystery of the structure remained, a puzzle waiting to be solved, but for the first time, Aria allowed herself to believe that humanity was capable of anything. Even this. The crew stood together, their eyes turned toward the stars, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they had proven that Earth was not a passive player in the universe anymore. And somewhere in the distance, the voice echoed once more, but this time it was different. Not a warning, not a threat, but a promise. "We will meet again."